Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the Kashmir situation and as the successful foreign policy of Pakistan as the pressure continues to build on India to stop the atrocities in Kashmir. We'll be talking about our efforts as far as bringing it to the international community is concerned and what kind of reaction we can expect in the coming future. How can we continue to build this pressure so that there can be a solution to this problem for the Kashmiris. I have with me today Saeed Fakhr Imam, who's chairman of the Kashmir Committee. Thank you for joining us today. And also Abdullah Hussain Haroon, who is a former foreign minister. Thank you for joining us today. Ji, Fakhr Imam Sahab, to start off with you. As far as Kashmir is concerned, you have a lot of experience in this area, not particularly Kashmir, but also foreign affairs. In your opinion, how do you think this situation will pan out as far as Kashmir is concerned, considering the fact that, as we were earlier also talking about, after a long span of time, we have been able to make a dent and get the international community to notice as far as Kashmir is concerned, as far as the issue of Kashmir is concerned, and perhaps to increase the pressure on India?
I think Kashmir issue is one of the two longest standing issues with the United Nations, and under the UN Charter, it's one of those disputes which has not been resolved in accordance with the basic resolutions of the United Nations itself.
Right.
And what were the underpinnings of those resolutions 1948-49, which were, it was India who took the complaint to the then Security Council of the United Nations, and then they came to this conclusion that Kashmir is a disputed area.
Right.
Second, that through plebiscite, which means transparent, fair and impartial elections, these are the words used,
Right.
under United Nations auspices, that elections will be held. Now it's a different matter, they never were held for whatever reason, despite the fact that Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and others are on record several times committing that they would do it, but perhaps it was two-tongued. They never intended to, but somehow it went along. Now that this dispute has again come up, we can now see that the elements involved, which are that after Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to the United States, two things emerged which went in favor of Pakistan. That Pakistan in fact was invited after a fairly long time, and it was an official working visit that the United States government felt that Pakistan has the key role in bringing the Taliban and the United States government to end the hostilities and perhaps have an agreement. So this was our major reason of our Prime Minister going there. And secondly, while he was there, President Modi in a press conference said that in Osaka, Japan, in the conference that took place 2 weeks earlier, he was approached by Prime Minister Modi. Would he be willing to play the role of a mediator, arbitrator? These were the two words used.
To which India, of course,
No,
denied.
Indians have denied it. Prime Minister Modi to this day has never denied it. So in fact, and then it was reiterated 7 days later again by President Trump that
Right.
this has happened. So that's one way. The Indians and the Lok Sabha, the foreign minister, obviously
But it does
they
make
would
them
have
look bad, doesn't it?
Well, it looks as if they are, as I said, not always most chaste and truthful
Right.
about things, but that's realpolitik. So we are aware of that. But in the process, I think because of these two elements where Pakistan was emerging after a long time
Right.
in that on the scene, that perhaps Mr. Modi, and this was nothing surprising. The timing perhaps could have been that they, from day one, the BJP in their manifesto, in their political program, had this written down that if they came into power, they would remove Article 370 and
Right.
Article 35A.
So in that
Although
sense,
we have officially never recognized either article, because this was an internal arrangement by the then Prime Minister Nehru and the then Chief Minister of Indian-occupied Kashmir, which was a disputed area for us and the world, but they had this arrangement amongst themselves where it had this special
Right,
status.
and although President Modi did say that he planned to do it from day one, it was still surprising for us, wasn't it?
Well, it
For the
had to
world.
be a surprise. Because this really changed the whole contour of the strategic, because it will have global impact, it will have a major regional impact, and of course between the two major powers of South Asia, out of SAARC there are 8 countries, India is the biggest, we are
Right.
the second biggest, so, and both are nuclearized. So in that
Right.
sense, India wants to be the regional policeman, India wants to be the regional hegemon, and I think the only obstacle is Pakistan.
Right, I'm going to go to Abdullah Hussain Haroon and then I'll come back to you. Mr. Haroon, of course, you know, you've been listening to my conversation, to our conversation, and the fact that, of course, it wasn't entirely a surprise, but although President Modi did say that he wanted to do away with these articles, but as far as the world is concerned now, the world is taking notice of the kind of the issues that are the violent, the human rights. The way they're being flouted left and right, and the situation in Kashmir in a manner that it hasn't done so before. In your opinion, do you think it's also because, of course, I mean, one has to agree that it's because both India and Pakistan are nuclear states?
Well, I believe that that is a very important matter. But to take it up where my friend Fakhr Imam has left off from, I believe that we should have been better prepared. We should have anticipated this as something that will happen sooner rather than later. Having said that, I think the important thing to bring forward is that it's not just the nuclear aspect which will be discouraged by the world community at best, but I think that the fear of the conflict which is going to take place in Kashmir and surrounding areas and its repercussions on surrounding countries, that has now become certainly a very dangerous point of conflagration, which is going to create problems everywhere. I believe that it's a matter of time. The valley, as it's better known as, is waiting for the curfews to be lifted and various other aspects to be taken up. Now, I believe that this may kick off and start something which will go much deeper, which may not be that easily controlled by both the countries in the conflict, India and Pakistan, and it could lead to horrible consequences. And those consequences are what I believe are going to ultimately decide the issue. And I believe that we're not ready or prepared for those consequences. And it's a matter of time. Already there has been skirmishes, there have been firing on the borders, and various aspects
for the consequences?
have in fact I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Do you think that India is better prepared perhaps for the consequences?
No, I don't think they are better prepared. I believe that the announcement or pronunciation by the American president that he is willing to mediate, it sort of jump-started the whole thing in as much they wanted to take it to a position that he would not be able to mediate. They were not at all in any way sincere in their efforts regarding the mediation offer. And that jump-started it. They just kicked into it straight away. I don't think they are militarily, despite the huge numbers of soldiers and others there, they have not been able to kill the Kashmiri spirit. And that is what is going to be the most important aspect ultimately. And that, I'm afraid, has only been kicked out of the bag, and it's only going to get worse. I believe that we, in our earlier stages should not have listened to Auchinleck and Gracie, and the Qaid at that time was not well, so those decisions perhaps were taken without him. And since then, it has been toing and froing. We haven't really got to a situation where anyone can get a grasp of it. And even the fig leaf, which was the state assemblies, which was Abdullah himself, I believe in all that, we have seen that it has become more naked by the hour, by the day, by the month, by the year. Aggression has increased tremendously. The Human Rights Commission report in the 7th of July this year and 5th of July last year, the rapporteurs have been very, very clear in their minds about what is not acceptable in Kashmir. And at the base of it is the 1990s Powers Act, which is given to act in Kashmir and not in any other part of India. And the weaponry being used upon the poor people of Kashmir, that in itself speaks for itself, with blindings as a major cause.
Right. I'm going to go to Saeed Fakhr Imam and then I'll come back to you. Ji, Fakhr Imam Sahab, as far as Abdullah Hussain Haroon is concerned, he said that, you know, the kind of conflict that may result from this issue within the region, perhaps both the countries are not prepared for and the world is not prepared for. Do you agree with that? Do you think that this can escalate to a level? Of course, I mean, the potential is there, the fact that we're both nuclear states, that is a reality. But do you think that that can happen? And, you know, what can we do to perhaps, you know, try to make, you know, decrease the risk of such a situation arising?
Well, I think Hussain is a very old friend of ours, and he's also been a representative to the United Nations and has been our foreign minister. So he perhaps has been focusing on it longer than I have. But my own perception is that as far as this conflagration or the implications of this very, very major card that Modi has played, he's played his last card in that sense, that he couldn't have gone further than what he did. And it's something out of desperation. But the world has taken notice. It's not out of just curiosity, it's out of pragmatism that even those countries, for instance, Russia has never backed Pakistan. It's when the erstwhile Soviet Union was there, they always used to lean towards India because they had that kind of a relationship. Now, China, of course, has gone out of its way to be a sponsor as far as this calling. We called it on the 13th of August, our foreign minister, an urgent session. It was called on the 16th, and Chinese played the key role, as did the Russians second, who went along with it, and of course then the United States.
But they have their
France,
own...
and yes, but the point is that they looked at this whole thing as an emergency, as something which requires immediate attention, as it does.
Because of Ladakh also. And
well, because yes, Ladakh is obviously for the Chinese access in that area, but the issue is that the here eyeball to eyeball.
Right.
And now the challenge is that he's, you know, now he's sitting on the LOC, direct.
Exactly.
And so Pakistan, and, you know, he could do anything. I mean, and Pakistan should be, and is prepared the way we were at Pulwama, which was all a false kind of an operation that they conducted, and they, for the time being, got the reaction which they deserved.
Right.
And the pilot got repatriated within 48 hours, which I think gave Pakistan a big feather in its cap. But now the issue is that the major five powers, the permanent members of the Security Council, are looking at it, and our Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, they've been now in contact with them. And you know, President Trump is a very different kind of person. He's not a sort of a politician of the normal kind that America has ever seen. So he thinks out of, as we say, out of the box entirely. And in my opinion, if there had been any other president who's gone before World War II in America, and I can count each one of them, probably none of them would have said what Trump said publicly in the way that he said it. Now the issue is that, he may even still want to play some kind of a role. But the Indians are extremely intransigent on this.
But as far as Prime Minister Imran Khan is concerned, he's also now said categorically that, well, they've misunderstood the way I conducted myself. They've misunderstood our perhaps the way that we were more welcoming, we were more, as far as Modi is concerned. And now all of that is off the table, and that he's very, very clear and categorical as far as our any sort of talks with them are concerned, or any sort of talk on Kashmir or related issues is concerned. So we're going to change our strategy.
Well, he has already changed it, because he has said in the last 48 hours categorically, as you are saying, that we no longer are looking at it with in the same way as he was earlier, because he said his whole theme was earlier that we want normal relations with our neighbors, and if India comes along, if they come with one step, we'll go with two. But that's in the past.
Worked.
But as of the 5th of August, things have totally changed.
Right.
So it's a new order. It's going to be a new kind of a relationship, and that's where the international, and it's the first time, I think what is significant is that the world media, the New York Times has come with 5 stories, including an editorial. The Washington Post has had 4 or 5 major coverage. The Guardian has really gone out of West England. The Telegraph, The Independent, their reporting was never like this. It's the first time after 15 or 20 years that I'm seeing that the Indian narrative is now looked upon totally differently. And this is what is going to be meaningful, because the think tanks, the academia, and all the others who are opinion makers in the countries that matter in the West, who talk of, and most of all, the human rights situation. As my friend Hussain said, these 2 reports that came out, the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations, were the game changers, the paradigm shift. Why? For 70 years, there was no such report by a United Nations Commission or a council. And they pinpointed all the major mega atrocities committed by the Indians and listed them. And they repeated them again this time in July. So 2 consecutive reports earmarked. In addition to that, House of Commons, there was a report condemning human rights. There was a European Union Committee report similarly, which was condemning. And then there was a very well brought out, over 500 pages on torture, where over a period of 10 years, 430 individual cases were listed. The New York Times sent out reporters, and when they came back, they actually put out an article which was extremely derogatory of Modi and his policies and his people around him, Amit Shah and Doval and whoever that was. And they then focused and said, this is what's happening. And this has carried a great deal of weight, because that's the theme of the West these days, is human rights violation. And the Indians have been caught on that, and now they want to do it, because all that cover they had previously, a constitutional cover of secularism, of democracy, has been now completely kicked out.
I'm going to go to Mr. Haroon. Mr. Haroon, as far as, do you agree that the narrative of the Indians, as Syed Fakhr Imam is saying, has actually really changed as far as the world is concerned? They're for the first time seeing India as, violator of human rights, and they're seeing India in a new light completely for the first time. Perhaps the reaction of the international media is unparalleled. Do you think that's true? Do you agree with that?
I believe Fakhr is right. For this time round, there has been a tremendous change around in opinion makers, especially the media, in the world. The only thing is that I'm a little, careful of, is that for far too many years, the United Nations peacekeeping force in Indian-held Kashmir is not allowed to operate. They have put them out of the picture, and those were major monitors of what was happening there. And their word used to become absolutely the final word. Now, they don't let them back in there. They're members of the UN. Has the UN been able to do anything about it? Not yet. Now we come back to the UN itself. What has happened is that despite the Supreme Court of India, which has clearly stated that 370 is a permanent part of the Constitution of India, as is 35A. Now, that means, for example, in Pakistan, when we say we are an Islamic republic, we can change many things, but we can't change that, can we? It's a permanent part of the Constitution. So, how has the Prime Minister flouted this particular aspect? And they've been flouting it with impunity for years. Look at the Babri Masjid situation. Do you know the Raja of Mahmudabad, after 20 years in the Supreme Court, won his case as a Muslim to have his ancestral properties returned to him by the Supreme Court of India. And the government of the union said, no, we're not going to honor this. And nothing could be done about it. So India, as Fakhr said, has been intransigent in all its policies and in what it says, and even in the rule of law and many associated things. I mean, today, there is a matter before the Supreme Court not gaining credence or hearing because they're afraid of the outcome. And why is the Supreme Court bowing down to the Government of Union of India? So I feel that there are a lot of things said. I can read to you aspects of Jawaharlal Nehru, who was practically a founder, when he has said, it is an obvious fact that even without our agreement, which means Pakistan and India, no country is going to hold on to Kashmir against the will of the Kashmiris. But that is what is exactly happening. And the fact that a curfew exists, a fact that strong arm tactics are being used indiscriminately, the fact that the two largest parties are behind bars, and even local government elections could not have been held. From every point of view, is Kashmir run as a normal state? No, it is being run specifically on the ordainment of the Government of India, which does as it pleases and is not honoring a single one of its founders' principles or its own principles. The fact that they have violated the status quo on 370, when there are resolutions replete in the United Nations, they're contradicting the United Nations. Even the similar agreement where it is clearly stated there will be no alteration in the understandings, agreements, and tie-ups between our countries, that has been violated. So from every fact and factor, it is being violated, and so far they feel comfortable. The Brits want a deal after they disassociate from Europe, and it seems that a no-deal Brexit is coming in. The French have got this great big Rafale jet sale to India. So that's two members of Security Council who, for economic reasons, have not really exposed. They used to always speak out on morality, on the necessity of keeping the word, etc., etc. So, yes, Russia has spoken out very critically. China has pushed this to the extreme it could. Even the Americans have allowed things to move. But I feel we should be far more stressed with the Americans into what should happen now, not just leave it enough by saying they've offered to mediate. Where is the mediation? And the first thing that's got to go is this cruel act that they've got in Kashmir, in which the forces are being brutally indiscriminate. And it does not exist anywhere in India. You can't shoot out eyes of Indian citizens in the rest of India. You can in Kashmir. I mean, just something like that alone should push the communities of the world to act strongly. And I would like to say it, though my friend Fakhr may not, that the Muslims, the IOC, I mean, they have been absolutely dead in this process. We're thankful to Iran and Turkey and Malaysia for all they have said. But where is the rest of the Muslim world? Anointing with prizes and decorations for Mr. Modi at this critical hour and creating great big deals. Well, they could have held those deals till they sorted out and exerted a bit of pressure on the Kashmir issue. So whereas a lot of things have gone right, a lot of things have not shown themselves to be right.
Right. Let me go to Syed Fakhr Imam ji. Imam Sahib, as far as this the fact that America should, where is the mediation? Of course, India may not agree to that mediation, but do you think it's possible for us to push America further?
Well, I think only in the last few days there have been two conversations direct between President Trump and Prime Minister Imran Khan.
Right.
And this is not normal happening in any kind of high diplomacy. So the Americans are, I think, fully in the picture. And now that there is the G7 meeting taking place in Europe, where informally this may be discussed among at least 3 or 4 or possibly all of them, that this kind of a situation. Prime Minister Modi is on an official visit to France today. So these kind of things will be discussed. And
that itself is unprecedented.
Yes, in the sense that because they will all take note of it, because and I think the way that the Western media has portrayed this thing, as I said, it's a total shift from the past, where the media and the powerful media, New York Times, I think, is one of the two most powerful organs of the media in the United States, along with Washington Post, and of course there are Wall Street Journal and many others which are all equally powerful. But in that sense, in the British newspapers, I'm sure Le Monde and Le Figaro and these papers on the continent are carrying all the big news. So that kind of information is there with the people who actually, and that is where Mr. Modi will be feeling I think, a bit of the pressure even when they broached the subject with the man. And I think he never expected this kind of reaction. But most of all, the key element is how, and I think Hussain spoke about it a little earlier, is you can't overcome through sheer force the will of the Kashmiri. And that is the key element. Because they, in the 1988-89, they took on the Indian Army and really made life so difficult for them. They lost, I think, tens of thousands of lives then. And now, with Burhan Wani's martyrdom, and the martyrdom of tens of thousands since then, the kind of funeral he had, and from that day on, just 3 to 4 years back, that the whole scenario has changed, because that is the determination, the grit, and most of all, the spirit and the will of the Kashmiris. The youth, I think, are bristling. And the kind of things they have done to their women, the children, I mean, this is unimaginable. I mean, the kind of Holocaust that they have imposed upon this, and the cruelty, and I think the world has to sit up and take notice. And the curfew, under all circumstances, must be left. And once the curfew, I think there'll be hundreds of stories of sheer cruelty that will come up, and the kind of tyranny that has been imposed on humanity, and the kind of things. And I think Mr. Modi and his cohorts should feel the heat.
But you spoke about within the spirit of the Kashmiris and the youth, that of course we've seen they've been very resilient, and from the
that's the base.
That's the base.
Yeah.
But as far as the abrogation of the articles are concerned, of course it's part of a larger plan. India plans to change the population makeup.
But that's it. You see, demography.
Yeah.
Demography change means that the Muslim majority of 80% must be displaced or replaced by non-Muslims.
Exactly.
Now, can they do it? This is the big question. I think they will not be able to do it so easily. They will try their best, but that is where the international intervention of some sort has to come in. Otherwise, otherwise there'll be genocide. And yesterday, this very a report that came out on the genocide story, where they have pinpointed genocide watches 10 stages of the genocidal process are also for advanced. And they actually list 10 different things under genocide of what can actually transpire. And this is a totally neutral experts who are advising the United Nations. Now these kind of reports will go viral. and they will focus, pinpoint the kind of genocidal tendencies that and they are actually wanting to do it. Now Modi, but why is he holding on to the curfew? Why has he totally put those people, where they have no communication with the outside world? In today's world, it could have happened 100 years back. But today, where everything is going second to second on digital technology, he goes and does all of this. So there is something, the Holocaust comes to one's mind, where he would like to eliminate people by the tens of thousands. Now, will the world just look? Now everything is looking you in the face. So where does so-called morality, I mean, what is democracy all about? And what are this kind of ethos, ethic, and this element missing in those kind of societies? Will they allow this kind of thing to happen?
But as far as options to Pakistan itself is concerned, what do you think, in your experience, what do you think our next steps should be to, of course, increase the world outrage on this issue, to do whatever we can to make this as, as much of an issue in the eyes of the world as we can, for it to continue to be an issue? Because, I mean, we've earlier had these discussions with different people about how Kashmir as an issue with Pakistan, perhaps we haven't been as consistent, not with what our stance is. On that, Pakistan has been very clear from day one. But perhaps the way that we've taken it forward has at times lost its momentum and at times gained it. Do you think that's true?
Well, what has happened in the past, I don't want to unnecessarily comment on. I think we have to look at today and tomorrow, and that should be our focus.
So what should
and that, to me, is the critical element, because that's where the decision making, because we have to look forward. Whatever has gone in the past, as you said, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But today, we have also, it's a great challenge. And I think our government has done well. And they have the start of even having that United Nations Security Council meeting, I think, was a very good start. It's the start. And in the process, our Prime Minister, Foreign Minister have been, speaking to all the relevant people, the counterparts that matter in the world. And on the 26th and 27th of September, they will be addressing the UNGA, the session which comes annually. But even then, there's a full month to go, 4 weeks. I think there will be very active diplomacy. And perhaps a few key people, not too many, may go and speak to their counterparts wherever they can make a difference. Along with that, we need to constantly engage the international media, because they will reflect, because they also influence public opinion, and those societies are very much public opinion oriented. They have to take on the next election. One of the reasons why Mr. Trump engaged with Pakistan now was because he's going into a next election, and the primaries start 3 months down the road. So he wanted to have his troops out, extricate is the word he used, out of Afghanistan. It's been an 18-19-year war. This is why he engaged Pakistan. So their own internal compulsions are such. Now, if 48 members of the House of Commons will write to the Prime Minister, it affects him. If 5 or 6, 7 representatives of the House of Representatives and Senate have spoken up in the American political context, it makes a difference. When the New York Times writes 5 or 6 articles, including an editorial, what the hell is going on? These voices are definitely heard. And as I said earlier, that the human rights element, genocide and people being dislocated, these are the ultimate things that, this is Modi's mantra of Hindutva. He is, coming out, if I may use the word, an inferiority complex.
And in the past, he has been successful with that.
Yes, he has been very successful. I mean, he's won his election on prejudice, on bias,
extremism,
on, yes, whatever word you want to use. It's a total bias, but it will have its negatives, because there is, in the northeast area of India, there is Assam, there is Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, and then he has an underground movement of Maoists, who in about 150 to 200 districts. So the fallout can be there. The South is not with him. He lost 3 elections in the general election. Even 5 months before the general election, he lost 5 states. This is why he came with the anti-Pakistan
Right.
propaganda in his manifesto, and he won his election on that.
Right.
And anti-Muslim is his theme, as a friend Hussain
Right.
just said.
Let me go to Mr. Haroon and come. Mr. Haroon, of course, we've been talking about the next steps that Pakistan can take. In your opinion, what do we do at this time that will keep the world engaged, that will, maintain the outcry, increase the outcry perhaps as far as the world is concerned, so that it remains an important issue for the world?
Be very careful. Be very careful. 6 million Jews were punished and killed by Adolf Hitler. Terrible. But 9 million Bengalis died in the famine when wheat ships from Australia were diverted to an unneeded storage house in Europe. So just be a little careful, because things are not looked in the same levels, unfortunately, everywhere. I have just this to say. We first have to prove to the West that the Indian Parliament could not pass this law of revoking 370. And I now quote the address in 1952 by Jawaharlal Nehru, when he says, "The goodwill and pleasure of this Parliament is of no importance in this matter, not because this Parliament does not have the strength to decide the question of Kashmir, but because any kind of imposition would be against the principles that this Parliament holds." So, decry this as an unprincipled move. And then he says to the United Nations, we would ultimately abide by the verdict of their plebiscite. If they tell us to walk out, I would have no hesitation in quitting. We have taken the issue to the United Nations and given our word of honor for a peaceful solution. So we have to point out that the Parliament does not have the right to do what it did. We have to hold out that the word of Nehru was given to the United Nations as a word of honor. Both of these have been discredited. What more can be expected from them? I believe we need to strongly discredit them. I believe that we have got to show a very strong resolve that we will not back down. We will not be pushed down. And for God's sakes, let's start time framing it. You see the way the Indians went about, oh, we promised them this, we promised them that, we promised. But it has all been something completely different. And to keep the world attention, there has to be a growing tension that lets the world know that this one isn't going to be buried again in the sands of time. And I believe that we have very strongly to show our case. We have to even push Donald Trump and say, look, mediation, let's start. Where are we at? We cannot just take it at the promise that the 7th Fleet was coming to the rescue of East Pakistan. 1 month, it hadn't gone up from one place to another, which wouldn't take them more than 3 days or a week. So I really believe that we have to stand with all this. And Fakhr has rightly said, it's an American election coming. This is the time to push on these issues where we should get the relief and find the relief. If we don't find the relief, we are not getting what is our due right. And I go a step further. Is it ours or theirs? No. It's the freedom of expression of the people of Kashmir that we must protect. And we should stop handing it out to them or to us. Bring in a plebiscite. Let them have what the people of Kashmir want, not what India or Pakistan want. And I personally believe that we should take up the issue in the Human Rights Commission, through the Human Rights Commission to even the International Court of Justice at The Hague. And the Security Council does not need to have the acquiescence of India or Pakistan. It merely needs to know how the question is to be put. Remember that. If we don't know how the question is to be put, we will not have achieved anything. And these huge losses and sacrifice of the Kashmiri people will not be realized. So let's take it from their perspective. Let us speak of what they intend to achieve, even if
as
it
far as
means
the issue of
independence.
International Court of Justice is concerned, you've been talking about that, but the question of assent is a very real issue there. So, you know, actually exploring that option might not work for Pakistan at this time, right?
Why not?
Because the issue of assent, India will not assent to it, and that's very important as far as the ICJ is concerned. They will only have jurisdiction.
That's just it. What you don't know, if the Security Council wants to take it to the ICJ to ask the question, 70 years they haven't been able to resolve it. If they take it to the ICJ, they do not need the assent of India or Pakistan. It can be referred by the Security Council directly to the ICJ. Please read up the law books on this.
Right, I'll do that. Ji, I'm going to go to Syed Fakhr Imam Sahab. Ji, Fakhr Imam Sahab, I've been corrected about whether the ICJ is an option that can be explored. Although, to clarify, I was only saying if Pakistan and India choose to go to ICJ themselves, they will need the assent. Of course, the other way of doing that is, as Mr. Haroon is saying, through the Security Council. Do you think that that can happen? It's a feasible option?
I think these are very intricate legal options. I have not actually studied this element very closely on the law, but I've heard some lawyers talk about it. And as yet, I think it's being examined very, very carefully, diligently,
right,
and as my friend Hussain had earlier said, cautiously, before Pakistan government actually makes any move. It is being examined, and I think those people who have been
right,
in the International Court of Justice, some of the lawyers, and there are very few highly specialized
right,
lawyers. I think Pakistan is in contact, one or two. So we are hoping that that element possibly will be there. But more importantly, I feel that the spirit of the Kashmiris needs to be completely uplifted. And one of them, they are looking at Pakistan. Pakistan is the key player in the region for the Kashmiris, because we've always said, this is our sharak, it's our lifeline. More important, that it's the part of the unfinished partition plan, which it is. And as my friend keeps on saying, which is one of the two elements of the UN General Resolutions, that the people must decide their own fate. And Pakistan totally agrees with that, through plebiscite, free, fair and impartial election. But how that is actually done, now that's part of the mediation or negotiation or arbitration or whichever word you want to use. But there again, it's the Indians, you see, and this is where I think and we need also people who actually influence governments in the powerful Western world are the think tanks, the world of the academe, a few of the universities which actually focus on South Asia. Now, if people there are accessed by us or in their own suo motu, they could do it and come out with what they feel should be the case, because this place could become a very strange kind of a place where, you know, our army is extremely fit and has, you know, gone through battles in the last 15 years, actually, and battle hardened. And in that sense, so we are fully prepared for any eventuality, as our establishment and the Prime Minister have stated very candidly, very openly. But that's the last resort.
Right.
But prior to that, I think we have to go through. Our diplomacy so far has worked reasonably well, some would say extraordinarily well. And I think we need to keep on pushing that. But these other elements, the parliaments that sometimes influence, they obviously do, because whoever holds the majority is the government. But along with that, the think tanks, the academia,
it's
but
important to get everybody on
more
board.
is the media.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today, Syed Fakhr Imam Sahab. Thank you for your time. Abdullah Hussain Haroon, thank you for being with us. As far as the issue of Kashmir is concerned, certainly it's not important. People like Fakhr Imam Sahab also said, people must decide their own fate, and it's not important what Pakistan wants or what India wants. What's important is what the people of Kashmir want. Unfortunately, and through the efforts of our diplomacy, the world seems to be noticing the atrocities, the human rights violations committed every day, the brutality in Kashmir. Let's hope that the world will take more notice, and let's hope that we can achieve a solution for the Kashmiri people. Let's hope we can work towards that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.